A little bit about my background and why promotions will make sense. I've been fortunate enough to work on a lot of e-commerce sites. That's my background. Apple, Walmart, Yum, helping them build their e-commerce platforms and managing those projects. The big, there's people work in a lot of different situations. You may or may not it may or may not make sense to apply everything that I'm talking about today to your situation. The ideas in this are really geared towards working with multi-product teams. On a lot of projects that I've worked on, there'll be, sometimes as many as 14 different project teams, each with like maybe between 3 on the very small side and maybe sometimes like 14, 20 on the big side, different product teams. And how do you coordinate? How do you come up with ideas for all of that? How do you collectively come up with ideas for the overall application or overall app or product? And how do you manage those? It could be hard to manage teams of, combined with like 200 people. So within building and managing plans, there's 5 key aspects, I think, that are important for a mature program management practice. The first is having a continuous exploration process that is very clear and organized. When you have a lot of when you're working with a lot of different product owners, all have their own opinions on what should or shouldn't be done, knowing what feature is being developed, who's when I say developed, like who's defining that feature, who's evaluating it, who's getting it estimated, understanding how to take, and for the whole team, how to take an idea and get it actually ready and into the product backlog is very important. So a clear continuous exploration process. The next is when you build plans, we build probabilistic plans that account for uncertainty. And I think that helps you see the future better. And if you can make a plan that allows you to see the future better, you can take steps to change that future. And we call that breaking the long poles. This is when we mean actionable plans. It's like plans you can actually do something and use that plan to make your future better. So now you've developed these beautiful plans that plans are always plans. Things will go awry. But you've built these good plans, and the next thing you need to do is coordinate. And when you're dealing with so many people, it's very hard to get everybody on the same page without having tons of meetings. So we'll talk about how to, what a kind of your agile ceremonies can look like to coordinate with so many people effectively without wasting everybody's time. And then finally, reporting is a necessity on any big effort like this. How can you do reporting and save, basically not make Jira the source of truth? How do you keep the truth in your program management tooling, your project management tooling? And we'll look at solutions for that. So this is it. For those who are joining, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them as we're going on, or I'll, some of them maybe I'll have to save and wait for the end. So let's talk about that continuous exploration process. This is, again, how you do opportunity selection. If you have a lot of different product owners, how do you manage the process to take their collective ideas about what we should do and prioritize them and pick the ones you should actually pursue? The important thing from my perspective as a program manager, as a person who's trying to organize this, I'm not trying to pick the right features, but I'm trying to organize this practice. It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's about clarity, who's working on what, who's developing what feature idea, when it's expected to kind of work its way towards the product backlog. Being actually continuous, I see a lot of places that do safe or scaled agile. They work in these fits and starts around PI planning. I think it's really advantageous to have a practice that, or an exploration process that Ideas can be developed at any time and you can pivot quickly. And then finally is swift. You want to find the right balance between defining what the feature is and allowing, like, getting stuff ready into development. You don't want to spend all your time building these massive product PRDs, right? You want to avoid having to spend every detail just to prioritize work because things will change. How can you find that happy balance? And we'll talk about that in this section. So the way that I prefer to set up a continuous exploration workflow is to break it into two. There is a discovery workflow that's managed and operated mostly by the product owners and the product folks. And then there's evaluation workflow where me as a program manager and the engineers, UX design, product design, all of that come together to evaluate the feature idea that product is working with us to develop. So in the discovery workflow, product managers, they're doing data collection. They're looking at customer surveys, their analytics, doing competitor research, ideally producing a report about how the product is doing and what people are saying. That report is used to generate ideas. Often these reports will be, every 6 weeks, something like that. People can reflect upon how the product is doing and create those ideas. Once those ideas come out, like a promotion, now, as I mentioned, it's time to first scope that. Like, when we say promotion, what do we mean? Is it a new promotion for new users? Is it promotion because it's a TV spot? We want to add a bit of definition around it, not tremendous amount of definition, but enough definition so we can evaluate whether we think this feature is going to be valuable, and we can estimate. We can do the cost benefit analysis so we can prioritize where the feature should land in the product backlog. This is a subtle animation here, but one key terminology is, instead of calling these features, we call them initiatives, because initiatives aren't always an actual feature that customers see. Sometimes tech debt and things like that you're solving. So we call them initiatives. And this gets reflected in Jira for us. I'm often using Jira, sometimes ADO, but most of this is going to show, all of this is going to show how to do this in Jira. We'll have the standard epics and stories, but we make an initiative on top of those things. It is it's an outcome-focused feature that spans multiple product teams. So you'll see here is an example, like one-click checkout. That's the feature, but there's an outcome associated with it. So you want 5% more conversion. So we'll create these initiatives, and then eventually we break down the work into their teams. Each team has its work, that's its epics, and then they create their own stories. So we'll set up a workflow in Jira to manage how ideas, which are these initiatives, go from just some idea that a product person might have or the team member might have, all the way into the product backlog. And we create a board here in Jira, and I'm going to show what that looks like and talk about the why it's valuable. So let's add promotions to it. So this is what the board looks like. Jira now has this nice feature where you can have a backlog that has hundreds and hundreds of items in it. It can be very long, but that is connected to a Kanban board. So when someone has an idea, hopefully this video will play. When someone has an idea, they just scroll to the bottom of this board and they just add it in, just simple as anybody's used Jira. You'll have seen this a bunch of times. So this is the big backlog, can have hundreds of ideas from all sorts of people. We will prioritize it in a minute, but when someone submits an idea, oops, playing the video again. Hold on, let me go to the next slide. When someone submits an idea, we ask them to define a few things so we can help prioritize it as an idea. What brief description on what is this feature? What are we talking about? What is the problem that it's trying to solve? Is it a customer problem? Is it a business problem? What are we trying to do here? And then the impact we hope it will have. And this is sometimes articulated as in terms of revenue, or it's, hey, we're solving some tech debt. We think we're going to improve our lead time 5-10% or something like that. And we also often use confidence to say, I think promotions is a good idea, but I'm only 50% confident right now. And with this, if you get a bunch of different features, the product teams will meet and they'll start debating which is the most important initiative, which initiative do we think is the most likely to be valuable for us. So let's move that to the top of the backlog. All right. So just they'll sort these things. And then when there's time and capacity for like a product owner to take on the work of defining it, getting it estimated, that type of work, they'll move it up into this refinement column. So once it's there, and they'll assign it to who's ever developing the idea at that phase. And this brings that initiative over to this Kanban board where you can see the creative promotion down here at the bottom. So we just work these initiatives then through from refinement all the way to like getting them ready in the product backlog. And we can know who's working on it and what the priority is. So let me finish that. So let's talk about what it looks like to go from refinement all the way to ready and what we have to do, what we typically are doing in each stage. So to get something refined, we again, we don't want to do like giant definitions, and we don't want to go to full design. We just want enough so we can evaluate and roughly estimate this. So we'll define, hey, like a racing matrix of who needs to be involved on what part, high level use cases, and then especially what's out of scope is really important. We want to be as incremental and agile as possible in the development of this feature. So we try to just pull everything you possibly can out of scope. But the most important thing are the wireframes, I think, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. We ask our product owners, you got an idea, just quickly draw it out. And that is often a good enough picture for like the delivery and engineering teams to estimate. Involve UX and design a little bit on this, but the uglier, the better. So this is using Balsamiq. I really love Balsamiq for quickly drawing up wireframes. And this might be like a promotion going end to end. Oh, we got to create a promotion. Someone's got to see the TV spot. And eventually it needs to be all the way down on their sales receipt. So now that we know what the feature looks like, it's time to get it estimated and validated. So we'll start with validating, but these things can happen at the same time. Validating is this, why do we think now it's actually going to be valuable? Now we know what the idea that we're going to pursue is. Should we do it, right? Is it going to produce value? There's a lot of different ways people can validate their product idea before they actually build it. I'm not going to go into all the details of these, but we just ask people to write up, hey, you looked at your data. Why do we think promotions might be successful? When we spend $50 on ad, or $50,000 on ads, it attracts 100,000 visitors. Here, if we do all the math, we think we can make this much in revenue. We're now this confident. So we ask people to write this up to kind of justify the value proposition. And then at the same time, the delivery teams can be estimating the work to create a promotion. And the way I do this kind of in a crazy like bullet point list where I'll just like meet with the engineering teams and be like, okay, who's going to do this part? You know, the store service needs to be able to create a promotion, make an API there. Marketing needs to do this work. And I'll kind of put pluses and minuses and what belongs in each epic. And so break the work down into epics for each team and then get estimates for those. The big difference in how we get estimates is we'll ask for this confidence. And this is how we use that to build the probabilistic plans. So we'll say, store might say, oh, I think it's 10 points or 10 days, however they estimate, and I'm 70% confident about that. So then once we have this, we can build probabilistic plans. And that's what we're going to talk about next, is how to build a plan so you can gauge how much effort this is going to take. So probabilistic plans. The goal, again, is so we can see the future as well as possible, so that later we can do things to reduce risk and hopefully shift our work left as much as possible. In order to understand it, I think it's worth comparing. It's worth comparing how most people build plans, which is they just get a bunch of estimates, put them together, and get a single done date, versus probabilistic plans that can provide a range of dates and probabilities. So let's talk about these. And Drake definitely agrees that probabilistic plans are better, and I hope you will too at the end of this presentation. So how do most folks build plans? They just they'll break the work down, say, oh, epic 1, 3 weeks, epic 2, 2 weeks, and then say, oh, it's going to take 5 weeks. Maybe a program manager might add a little like extra fudge factor, add 20, 30% on top of this. Maybe they do it with experience about how the team estimates. But even that, there's a problem, right? Like teams will give different estimates. Like some will just double whatever they think it is and give you that as their estimate. And then other teams will just say, no, I think 50% of the time it's going to take 2 weeks, and they'll just say 2 weeks. What happens is your project plan is this like fudge cake of lots of people. You're just giving single numbers, but there's all this like uncertainty and fudging built into it. And you can't use that in any like productive means once you've just taken, oh, I think this is going to be 7 weeks. And I think this is going to be, 4 weeks or whatever you adjust it to. That complexity is lost when it gets boiled down to a single number. So this is why we use probabilistic estimates. That's why we use the confidences. Often, I'm sure many of you here have struggled with teams missing estimates and giving bad estimates. It's something I see very common. It's extremely common. But what I think will show is that it's not really the team. The team is providing probably relatively good estimates. It's the modeling of those estimates that needs improvement. This will make more sense in about 6 slides. In order to understand it, we need to go back to statistics a little bit and talk about probability distributions. So this is the normal distribution, the thing that most people are familiar with. The higher the line goes, the more likely that number is to be picked. And there's a kind of probability ranges where like between -2 and 2, there's a 95% chance that a number gets picked between -2 and 2. The graph here is represented by a few different numbers. The first is like the mean. That's your average. So if you keep getting number after number after number and averaging those numbers, it approaches 0, the average. And also there's the width of the graph, which is represented by the standard deviation or the sigma. This is 1 at 1, but if it's 2, it's going to get kind of a wider, flatter graph because the numbers can range more. The mean would still be 0, but it's just wider. It's more likely you might get a number 3 or -3, for instance. So And this will be important for later. There's another number called the median, which is different than average. This is the number at which 50% of the time the number will be between like 0 and negative infinity, and 50% of the time the number will be between 0 and infinity. In the normal distribution, the median and the average, the mean, are both 0, but that's not true in all distributions. And again, hint, hint at the future. So what you might think is, okay, great, Justin. Maybe we just use the normal distribution and use that to model our due dates or end times. So we say epoch 1, we got an estimate of 3 weeks. We're just going to model, and this is the probability that we'll hit 3 weeks. But you'll notice here, if, like, let's say the distribution was a bit wider, you can see there's actually like some room here under the graph. So there's a probability that our epoch ends before it starts, because the normal distribution stretches both to negative infinity and infinity. So you might be thinking, okay, the normal distribution doesn't really make sense here. Is there a distribution that does make sense? And yes, there is. This is the log normal distribution. You can see it starts at 0, stretches out to infinity. The log normal distribution is used in a lot of natural phenomenon. It can be used to model a lot of different things. I think hospital stays will show that it can map to software development times, or there's evidence for it. But I think hospital stays and software development times can kind of they can be they're kind of similar. Like if you check yourself in for a broken arm, most of the time they might say, oh, that takes like, that might take like a couple hours at the hospital. But sometimes it goes very wrong and can explode exponentially. And that's true with software development times. So there's a great article, Why Software Projects Take Longer Than You Think, by Eric Bernhardsen, that this is what got me, his insight to this got me thinking about modeling software projects with statistics. And he showed, using some public repositories on estimates versus actuals in software development, that software development times map to a log normal distribution. Well, and that's really important. That was a great insight. But I think the real insight that he had is the log normal distribution can explain why estimates always feel so wrong. It's because when you ask people to estimate, when you ask humans to estimate, they're thinking the median time frame. We're not fully equipped to think through the average time frame. And we'll talk about what this looks like. I'll kind of give some explanation what this means. So with the log normal distribution, if someone says, I think this is going to take 1 week, they're probably giving the median time frame. 1 week, it'll take less than 50%. There's 50% chance it'll take between 0 and 1 week, and 50% of the time it'll take between 1 week and essentially infinity. They're thinking median. Even if they're trying to think mean, we tend to think median, but the mean time in the log normal distribution does not match the median. On average, it takes longer because there's a chance it goes to infinity. And this difference is why it's probably not your team, but it's the way you're modeling your estimates. So you can see for yourself. Take 3 seconds and think through what is the average of these 5 numbers. 3, 2, 1. Did you guess 51? I mean, you might have, because I was leading you to that. But a lot of times when you ask people this, if you give them a very short time, they'll say, like, they'll look at the middle number and think, oh, maybe this number is really big, so maybe think it's like 35, but they won't think 51. And these are actually like randomly chosen log normal numbers. Fits that distribution. Okay, so great. Now let's model this with the log normal distribution, and we'll say, hey, give us an estimate of 3 weeks And we're going to look, the average will actually be about 5 weeks. So, okay, we can account for the extra time just by using this log normal distribution. We can actually use this log normal distribution to account for even like this is the average at 5 weeks, which is about 70%. You're accounting for 70% of the outcomes. But if you wanted to be even like more risk adverse, you could give, if, let's say you want to account for 80% of the outcomes, you could give 7 weeks, or 90% of the outcomes, 11 weeks. But one thing this shows you is how like explosive the log normal distribution is, that it's like, oh, someone can give you an estimate of 3 weeks. And if it's just one standard deviation of variance and you want to be 90% sure, you might have to give them 11 weeks of time. One thing to note is there are other graphs. This, this probability density function, hard to look at for when, like what likelihood, it's hard to kind of see which week matches to which likelihood. There are other graphs that show this much more easily. And this is the cumulative distribution function. And there's one, so now we're getting somewhere. We can kind of like easily see, oh, I want 75%. I need to give about like 6 weeks. But there's one problem with putting this in action. You can't really ask people like, how uncertain are you in your estimate? Express that in standard deviations. Engineers won't know what you mean by that. So we ask for it in confidence, and we have a mapping of confidence to standard deviations. One standard deviation is 33% confident. And the other thing that we have is a tool, which I will share a link to if people want to play with it in the chat. So this is all the tools that I'll show today are free and open source. All of them have like a link at the header you can click on, and please contribute to it if you want to help. But this is what we use to kind of train teams to do the statistical estimation, so they get a feel for how confidence impacts like the probability distribution. So here you can configure it with story points or things like that, but I'm going to leave it in days. Someone gives you a 10-day estimate and 50% confident, it will write out like the average, the different likelihoods. So here, if we wanted to be 90% sure the work is going to get done for 10-day estimate 50%, we have to give 25 days, 2.5 times. It also shows a graph that you can kind of see as like the days grow, the likelihood of completion grows. And people can play with this. Oh, what does 10% do? Well, that's like 5x for 90%. What is 95% confident? I mean, you kind of see like it immediately ends. And you can switch between probability density function if people want to nerd out on this the way that I do, which hopefully you're not. Hopefully you're different than me and don't get quite as geeked out by this kind of stuff. But will train teams like, oh, give me, how long do you think it's going to take? 20 days. What's your confidence? 60%. Okay, well, on average, that's going to be 25 days about, and we're going to, sometimes it'll double, like 10% of the time, it'll be double or longer. Yeah, okay, that feels right. So, okay, that's your confidence. So, go to the next slide here. All right, so great. You understand log normal, hopefully, and you're like, oh, we can train the team to use that tool, build out confidences. Now I just need to build my roadmap. And you might expect that the way to build your roadmap is just take the 20 points or whatever, divide by your velocity, get 10 days or something like that, and then adjust for whatever confidence threshold you want to adjust for, and say like, oh, we're just going to add a little bit of extra weight based on the log normal distribution. And we'll just build all of our epochs up. And now we have our statistical plan. You'd be very close, but still not quite right. And the problem is you can't add distributions the way that you might expect. You can't just add them as like normal numbers. If you have a epic that 90% of the time will be done in 3.6 weeks, and then that is blocking another epic that's the same way, you'd think that you can just add them, but that's actually accounting for too much risk. You would only want to add 6.5 weeks to account for 90%. Now, the way you can calculate this is some advanced calc, and nobody wants to do that. And it's not just when you're adding epics in parallel. There's a similar problem when you're, let's say you had 2 epics running in parallel. To account for the risk, it's not 3.6 weeks that they're both 90% likely to be done. You have to give even more time. So how do you model this? Well, you use what's called a Monte Carlo simulation. And a Monte Carlo simulation, what it does is it's going to take your roadmap, if you will, and randomly select a time when that epic might be complete based on the log normal probability distribution. So, for instance, this little what it might do is pick like this, I think, was supposed to be 100 is 1 week. So this is 0.28 of a week and 0.61 of a week for this epic and this epic. And it'll take whichever one's biggest and make this the resulting probability distribution of the plan as a whole. So you use a computer simulation to like test out like all combinations, but probability based selection of these numbers, and add up all of those outcomes, and it builds a resulting probability distribution. So you can say, okay, the 90th percentile case for this is actually 3.5 weeks, even though it should be, if you took a large enough sample, it actually should be 5.1 weeks. So, okay, now you've got to build a Monte Carlo simulation to use the statistical planning. Oh, but you don't, because I also created another open source project that connects with Jira. And that's what this is. It can load your epics with story points and confidence from Jira, and then build a probability distribution of the resulting due date and the result, how much like each epic, what its probability looks like. So for our promotions, this is saying that on average, if it were to start today, on average, it would end April 25th, but there's a 10% chance here that it could end like beginning of April or earlier. And there's a 10% chance it could end late May or later. And you can get the same kind of information on each epic. It kind of shows like the probability distribution of start times and the probability distribution of end times. And this can write back out to Jira. So this is like an auto scheduler like Jira has. This one's free, and does it with statistical probabilities, and allows you to change your like team velocity. So if we want to say, let's add more people to order, it'll rerun the simulation and then give you a new time range. And it can split teams, and there's a whole bunch of other features. You can kind of control like how, let me share this too while I'm working on it. Shared that link. I don't know if did that link work for everybody. Yes. Okay. It can write back the plan out to Jira, which is really nice. There's a lot of other customization it can do, but check that out. Let me know if you like it. All these tools, because they are open source, if you find a bug or something like that, or you want an improvement, just create an issue in GitHub and I will take a look at it. Okay, so now you can use this auto scheduler and build those plans. Now you can prioritize. There's a whole variety of different methods for prioritization. It's kind of outside the scope of this talk. A lot of places, they use some kind of variation of Rice score combined with shortest weighted job first. But now we know the cost, we know the value proposition, we can rank our backlog. Okay, so I think there's a lot of plans or a lot of benefits of building probabilistic plans. I think when you after you train the team on how to do it, it's actually way easier to get estimates, because if you go to an engineer and you're like, hey, can you tell me how long this is going to take? And they know, like, on average or median, it might take them like 3 weeks, but I've been in this situation. You're just like, oh man, 6 weeks. You add more. But when you give them the ability to say, well, I think it takes 3 weeks, but I'm really not confident about that, and they know that you're taking that data, they'll give you estimates faster and it'll be less hemming and hawing. It also is more uniform, as I said, because everybody is encoding uncertainty in the same way. You can make use of that. And because you're getting a probabilistic outcome, it's easier to meet expectations. It's easier to tell business, like, yeah, I'm thinking it might be mid-March on average, but there's still a 10% chance it's in June. Okay. Then if June happens and it hits that 10%, like, well, that was a possibility. Because you know where your risks are better, you can optimize for that, as we'll see in a second. And then ultimately, I think it helps improve prioritization, which is really important for product people, because you understand the costs and uncertainty involved in what you're prioritizing. Okay, so we've got these great plans. Let's improve them, right? You get an initial estimate, you get an initial plan, go and improve the outcome here. So change the future, shift your work left. And the way to do this is fairly simple. Once you have your plan, identify the thing that's taking the longest and focus on improving that. What can you do to shorten that time frame? So we'll just talk through a variety of different strategies here. Starting with the one that relates to, we're tracking these confidences, let's make use of them. So often what's in the long pull, if you will, the critical pathway, is the things that have the least amount of confidence. And that's true for this adding a promotion to cart. Maybe they have low confidence because they don't know what the API that they're going to have to consume looks like. And this is a lot of useful information as like a project manager. Let's go improve that certainty. Let's sit down with the store team and pencil out what an API might look like. Does that give you more confidence? That might bring the work in. That's typically the first easiest thing to go target and tackle. Next is restructuring work. Well, the store service has to build these APIs for the order service to start. Well, can the store service mock some endpoint there, allowing the order service to start right away? Sure, that also shifts the work left. Great. Can we adjust resourcing? Now, for one initiative, often you're not making resourcing decisions based off one initiative. You need, sometimes these plans will be like, I'll be building plans that kind of look like 3 months to 6 months out in the future. And then you 100% have enough time to start making resourcing decisions. We can hire more people, move people between teams, things like that to bring in work. But for one initiative, it's not less likely, but I'm going to show it here. Order is doing the vast majority of work. Let's add some resources there to bring it in. But maybe we have to take them from the store service, so that's going to get a little bit longer. But overall, it's still a net win to move somebody between teams. Finally is reducing scope. I put an asterisk by this because I always say it's not reducing, it's just delaying scope. Because some people worry that they're not going to build like the perfect feature right away, but we'll get there. So maybe in this case, that order end date error handling, right? So it's possible that someone has a promotion, but it's we're about to end the promotion, but the user's already added to their cart. Like, okay, we got to give them a good error message and tell them. But do we really for launch? Maybe not. Maybe we can release that shortly after launch, but before the promotion has ended. There's a risk, of course, we want to end the promotion early, but maybe we can do that and bring our work a little bit earlier. Release a little bit earlier. Get it validated. Are people using promotions? Did we make an impact? So if you apply all these techniques together, often you can really make a big impact on the overall timeline because you're able to coordinate really well between all these different groups. and do work in kind of the best order to achieve the outcome you're looking for, the timeline you're looking for. Okay, next is coordinating. You've built these plans. Now you've got to manage the work across a large amount of people. As I said before, the most important thing is, well, it's to get alignment with everybody so they know what's needed to be done on what's blocking what. But the essential problem is we've got so many people. How do you communicate with that many people? And I'll also mention, I want product teams, the individual teams, to be empowered and not just kind of subservient to the program, which can happen because the program spans everything. But I want them to be like, how can we make the best slice of our part of the product? So let's talk through how to organize these meetings and these teams and kind of like what do the agile ceremonies look like. So we'll split up our sprint planning into two parts, a sprint prototyping and a sprint planning. At sprint prototyping, that's where the individual teams are meeting and talking high level priorities, what they want to do. They're kind of building a prototype sprint. And then they meet as a team at program planning, or they meet as like we'll talk about it in a minute, but like they meet as a program, talk about what's important for the program, and then have time for refinement and sprint planning. Let's go into a bit more detail here. So we have two teams, team A, team B, and they're going to start sprint prototyping. They'll go through their backlog and they'll talk about each epic that they have to work on. And what do we need to do for it, team? Like what's going to be the most valuable thing that we think we need to be doing? What are the stories that we think we need to have? Oh, you are. Thank you. I did not click the button back. Thank you, Joan, so much. Where did oh boy. Where did I? Oh yeah. So we didn't talk about any of this. These nice slides that I made. Okay, hopefully people get it through what I was talking about. Where did we? Yeah, okay. So yes, there's some slides here. I could share the slide deck or whatever for people who want to go back to it. These are the ways that you reduce the scope, and hopefully it was somewhat understandable. But thank you for thank you again, Joan. Back to sprint prototyping. Teams meet, work through their backlogs, and they'll actually create shell stories, which are okay, that's good. They'll actually create shell stories for what the upcoming sprint. That's a good way of aligning everybody, like what we need to do. So both teams will kind of meet as a group, their own individual team, talk about their priorities, what they need to accomplish. This is really easy in Jira because it has this epics panel. I know sometimes folks don't always use it, but like often when I was managing individual teams, have the epics panel have like your priority epics, and it's very easy to click on it, be like, add a promotion to cart. What do we need to do to make that work? End date error handling. What do we need to do to make that work? And make sure you have all your stories in place. Once teams kind of have a rough idea of what they need to accomplish, then representatives from those teams, product owners, delivery managers, they meet as a program. And they will do something very similar and go initiative by initiative. So they might start with talking about promotions, if that's like the one that's most important, closest to delivery. Talk about, okay, where are we? Are we all on the same page for this initiative? This might be one of the most important things to take away from this if you're not already doing it, is don't have meetings that go team by team. That there's a lot of noise in those meetings. A team will talk, nobody else will listen. Have your meetings go initiative or feature by feature. Start at the closest one to delivery, go through that, go to the next feature, the next feature, the next feature, make sure everybody's coordinated. I will produce a agenda in 5-minute increments and say, this is when we're talking on every initiative, and I'll say who needs to come to it. And if you aren't on the list, you do not have to come to that 5-minute section. You can shut your teams down or whatever it is, and or check email, you're not expected to pay attention. I want people, like, when it's time to pay attention, it's time to go, and otherwise, like, get out of the meeting. Let's focus on what it takes to get stuff done. So they'll talk through that initiative. Maybe it's, again, promotions, and yeah, it takes a lot of work. I'm responding what David said. It takes a lot of work to build those agendas and make sure everybody's in their 5 minutes, but for the program manager, but it's so worth it, I think, for everybody else. As I was saying, as you're going through and talking about that feature, maybe there's other stories that pop up. Oh, shoot, team A, you have to do this for us. They can add, as I'm animating in here, another shell story. And maybe the same thing happens when you're going through the initiative Y. Team B has to add more work, has to add another story. Okay, now we really have a plan. We have our rough idea of what needs to be done from both the program and the product team. They can have time to refine any stories that haven't already been refined and point them. Sometimes they meet with the whole team. Sometimes they pull in individuals to point each story. Teams can decide for themselves on how to do that. And they should go into sprint planning with their backlog fully pointed. And it's really just about aligning on sprint goals at this point, and deciding what you have capacity for. So maybe, team A doesn't have time for story 4 and team B for story 10. And this kind of back and forth 2-phase commit is how we, I think, allow for the program, the teams to all get in sync, to have time to write any remaining stories, and have a pretty effective and straightforward sprint planning. Okay, I have like a few more minutes for reporting. So for reporting, I wish everybody could just look at like the Gantt chart and use that to know what's going on. I want that to be the source of truth, because that's what I use to help coordinate all the different teams. But I'm often asked to like build reports that look like this, or look like this for various stakeholders. And those reports take a lot of time. And even worse is sometimes these reports can become the source of truth. Like if I'm given a choice between updating my slides, which is going to see by my boss or my boss's boss's boss, or updating Jira, I'm going to update these things. But in the long term, that's worse, because it's this that helps me coordinate and gives me the fine-grained detail so I can help manage the project. So I really want the project management software to be the source of truth. I created another tool. That's this tool right here. This is a tool that can help roll up dates from Jira, to like roll up your epics, your initiatives, and report on it. And I can just cut out like screenshots from it and put it into my PowerPoint slides. It can compare Jira, what it looked like 2 weeks ago, to what like Jira looks like now, or any time frame. So it can kind of give you like how much time has shifted. And this has really helped me be not spend my time in Jira, make sure Jira is the source of truth, and do a better job of reporting. This is, again, free and open source. I'll share the link. This tool is the one that's kind of like the most rough right now. But if you do want to use it, let me know, and I'll I'm keep improving it all the time. I'm happy to take feature requests for that. And generally, I recommend having your meeting where you're giving those PowerPoint slides and reporting to Steerco right after sprint planning. Sometime definitely after program planning, ideally after sprint planning. Try to schedule those meetings then, because that's when you'll have the most information to share with the executives. Okay, that is the talk. Thank you, everybody. It was quite a journey we went on. Try to hit as much of like the high level stuff I think a mature program practice brings to bear. Happy to stick around if people have questions, comments, thoughts on this. Please let me know in the chat. Oh, I forgot to mention one other thing. All of this material, I wrote up a free training. I'll share the link for this. It like goes in how to build this all out in Jira. There's videos on it. Yeah, how to set up those boards, like much more detail. If that's something that you're interested in. And I actually, if you're even more, if you're very interested, I'm going to host a free webinar that I'll post a link to, and go through specifically like the estimation tooling, if that's something that you're interested in learning about, or how to build those probabilistic plans. I think it's going to be doing that on March 26th. So like 3-4 weeks. So yeah, any questions? You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Love to hear what you